Stanley, thank you for a very compact presentation taking us all across the markets, and actually for finishing 39 seconds ahead of your time. Congratulations. Thank you. So if I can have Per Askeland of DNB GL, there he is, to take over and guide us to the next panel. Thank you. DNB GL being one of our global sponsors and a great partner. So thank you very much. And please, if we can have the panelists join us.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to introduce you to a very competent panel to discuss 2020. It's a market disruption about to happen. And I think that before we start, I would like to introduce the panel. We have Mr. Sverre Bjørn Svenning from Fearnley Research. We have Andreas Hadjipetrou from Columbia Shipmanagement. We have Captain Gerry Larsson-Fedde from Costa. Christopher Hall from American P&I Club. And Andrew Knox from Total Lubricants. But before I start up the panel, I just want to say a few words about what is a market disruption. So in the business theory, it's a situation where markets cease to function in a regular manner, which is opposed to a disruptive innovation, where the innovation actually creates a new market, displacing established players. So we are not going to talk about new players, we are going to talk about what is happening in the shipping market as such. So I would like to start up with a common question to the panel to start us up. So what is, from your point of view, the single most important market disruption impacting the maritime industry in the next couple of years? So, Sverre, start with you.
Well, that's a tall order, but now, of course, I mean, 1st of January next year, I think that the 2020 is going to be a big mess in the markets, operational-wise, commercial-wise, a big mess. But I don't think it's going to last for very long. I mean, there are solutions and things will smoothen out as we go by, but periodically it's going to be very, very challenging.
Well, I will have to agree entirely on what has just been said, but I would like to put a slightly different flavor in calling it an evolution rather than anything else. I think we will definitely see in the future cleaner shipping, more transparent, higher connectivity. So generally, this is a positive thing which will help all of us rather than look at it for a short-term disruption, as has been said.
Yeah, I do agree. I think with both my esteemed colleagues here, I think basically the IMO sulfur cap that's coming into place in 2020 is going to have a big impact on the industry. Now, the industry I represent has already done quite a lot in this aspect on our vessels. But another disruption that we're actually seeing in this region of the world is that we just recently saw an announcement from here in China of the banning of the open loop scrubbers, which as well is going to make it even more difficult for the vessels to operate in accordance with the regulations here in this region of the world.
As an insurance person from the P&I world, we look at things more from a risk perspective, and it's clear that there will be an increase, a likely increase in risks with the IMO 2020 coming into effect. It's unclear at this stage quite how disruptive or how much of an increase in risk there may be. We may see an actual improvement in one category of risk, and that there might be some more scrapping of vessels. One of the options of dealing with IMO 2020 is to not trade, to get rid of your vessel, and that could improve the overall fleet profile, which could help with the risk factor. But what we're all watching and worrying about and reading about is the bad side of the risks, the increase of the risk which relates to technical problems, the blending, the incompatibility of fuels, supply, could lead to engine issues, claims, casualties, more charter party disputes, more bunker disputes. And so on that side, we see a larger area of potential risk arising as a result of IMO 2020. And I think, as has been hit on earlier today, the problem is there's uncertainty. And insurers don't like uncertainty any more than owners and markets like uncertainty. So I think that will be the main risk factor that we see is the IMO 2020.
Yes, I can only agree. We're now about 6 months away from probably one of the biggest changes in the way ships are fueled for many years. So yes, we're at the beginning of that process. I represent the lubricant side, and there will be clearly there also a knock-on effect as the sulfur content of the fuel decreases. Then the lubricants on the ships will also need to be re-looked at, and the BN of the cylinder oils, etc., will decrease. So there's a change both in fuels and in the lubricants on the ships.
Thank you. And it seems that there seems to be some agreement that the IMO Convention is basically the big talk of the town, basically. And I think that Dr. Stoffer gave a very good framework of where we're heading, and I think that I want us to continue where we actually stopped now, with because fuel is a key going forward, and I would like to know: is there enough available compliant fuel for those operators who have not actually installed a technological solution?
Okay, perhaps I can tackle that one. I'm actually from the lubricant side, but talking to my colleagues in the marine fuels department of Total, they will be in a position to supply all their contracted customers with compliant fuel. And what we believe is that the industry will be in a position to provide sufficient compliant fuel to meet the requirements. There are enough molecules of different hydrocarbons coming out of the worldwide refining industry to make these fuels. It's really more a question of price than availability the price will drive the availability, but we believe there will be sufficient fuel. The cost of this new fuel clearly will be higher than the cost of the existing heavy fuel oil.
Yeah, I think to comment on that, I think from we have experienced here, we've done some modifications on some of our vessels in order to be able to carry several fuel types. Currently, we're carrying 3 fuel types on our ships, which includes MGO, HFO, and VLSFO. We have been able to source all 3 fuel types out of Tianjin and Shanghai. The question will be when 2020 comes, when there will be a lot more vessels requiring that form of fuel, if there will be the same availability. Right now, this is quite new, so we still actually had to wait quite a while before the fuel was available in Tianjin. So I hope there's going to be enough fuel, but also again back to the scrubber ban, that's also going to require even more availability of additional fuel sorts as MGO or very low sulfur fuel oil, and eventually ultra low sulfur fuel oil.
Hello. I would just like to continue a little on the fuel, because what additional or other options exist for the shipping operator? Maybe Andreas, you could say something about that.
Well, Per, just to put it on a very simple basis, as far as each vessel operator is concerned, assuming that there is enough availability, which everybody believes that there will be, for each and every vessel, you need to make sure that that the ship is prepared for 2020, and obviously you need to clean your tanks, you need to create the procedures, you need a specific risk assessment per ship to make sure that the crew and the ship is ready for the 2020. And of course, to do that, you need to prepare before. It's not just a cut-off date on 2020. We expect that all ships managed by us will be ready by October this year. And I think this is the same with each and every operator. So generally, we shouldn't panic that 2020 comes and is a big disaster. We have been changing fuels in ECA zones for many years, so it's not as if this is. It reminds me partly of the millennium era when the IT people thought that by 2000 you have a big change and some companies need to close down the office. So it will not be like that. We will continue operating the ship. Now, moving into alternative fuels, obviously LNG is the most tested and environmentally friendly way, which we all know it works. The thing is that the infrastructure is not there yet. So it's not commercially viable to retrofit LNG facilities on board the ships from one day to another. However, moving forward into the future, as it was mentioned earlier, we have to look in the ways of bunkering the ships, and LNG is expected to become more and more commercially viable, and this is what is being seen for the future. Of course, there are certain other ways of bunkering, like biofuels, hydrogen, and so on, but these methods need to be tested first before they come into the play, as well as electric ships and so on.
Yes, I think from the Total side of that, we're very much involved in trying to develop LNG bunkering, and there was a recent agreement done with CMA CGM, and that really was to solve a little bit the chicken and egg problem that to put in place the infrastructure for LNG bunkering is hugely expensive. So to do that, you need a customer who's going to take the product. So the deal with CMA CGM is to start that off, and we will be putting in bunker tankers, LNG bunker tankers in Northern Europe, Singapore, and in future in other ports. So it is starting that industry, and certainly in Total, we believe that LNG can be a major fuel source for ships in the future. And going back to Martin's presentation, again, it's another step on the way to the decarbonization. It helps, but it's not a solution. LNG ships are reckoned to produce something like 20% less carbon. So they're one step on that route. They're not the full solution to decarbonizing shipping.
Thank you very much. So Andreas, you say that the shipping industry is prepared for 2020, but and I said that also installing scrubbers is a solution. It is maybe a challenge on availability for yards and producers as such. But for those ship owners that yet have not decided their strategy, what kind of options are available for them?
Well, just to follow up on the future fuel and LNG, I think that, IMO 2020 is serious business, and as I started out saying, it's going to be really messy next year, and I think that my colleagues here have confirmed that have many challenges. But going into the future a few years and looking back, I think it's going to be considered more than a nuisance than disruptive or revolutionizing. Next week, there's an IMO meeting in the Marine Environmental Protection Committee. And if you've seen the agenda, it's not a single word about sulfur and IMO 2020. It's a done deal. It's behind us. It's the greenhouse gas emission strategy that really counts now. And 40% cut in basically CO2 emissions in 2030. I mean, if any of you go out and contract a ship today, you haven't even reached the second special survey when that hits. And it's 40% down compared to the emissions in 2008. And I did a quick count the other day, and I think that the world fleet of gas carriers and bulk commodity vessels, container carriers, in 2008 was some 940 million deadweight tons. Today we are pretty close to 1.5 billion. So that is going to be an enormous challenge. And that is going to change the world dramatically. I think that LNG is part of the solution, but not the optimal solution. I think we have to go down other avenues to find solutions. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wants to comment on the options on strategy? If not, I think that we can move a little forward with what kind of impact the 2020 sulfur cap has on the industry in other areas. So my question now to Captain Gerry is that we may see other operational patterns within the industry, such as reduction of vessel speed, as we mentioned before today, impact on charter rates, etc., and what may be a further consequence for such operational scenarios?
Well, as also Andreas was mentioning, obviously the changeover of the fuel, I don't think it's as simple as saying we've done this in the ECAs before and that therefore it's not a risk. It's clearly a risk doing the changeover, especially with vessels. And fortunately for us in our industry, we have a lot of engines on our ships. We normally have 5, 6 engines, so when we switch over fuel, if we have a problem with that, we still have a redundancy on our ships. Vessels with only one main engine, switching over fuels with challenges for viscosity of the fuel, the human error factors, there's clearly a risk. And this, at least if you look at this area and some of the other areas of the world, where you need to do this changeover of the fuel is actually close to the 12-mile boundary, which in this area, for instance, is a very highly trafficked area, which means if you have a blackout on a vessel in that area, it may have severe consequences for the safety of the other ships and that ship in that region. So I think, yes, there are procedures. We need to put in place these procedures. I know the class societies and the flag states are working on procedures for doing changeover of fuel in the safest possible manner. But still, by doing so, you are going to increase the risk for sure. And therefore, we believe that this banning of the AAQS or open loop scrubbers in port or inside ECAs is not probably the right way to go, both from an environmental side of it, but also from a safety point of view. We believe that changeover should be done when you come alongside a pier. You either change over when you're alongside to a different fuel type, or you switch to shore connections, which we also have installed on about 50% of our fleet.
Would any other have any comments on that? Andreas, do you have a viewpoint?
Well, there is a tendency generally for people who have installed scrubbers to basically overestimate the risks which are there, and this is perhaps for commercial reasons. From our point of view as an operator or a technical manager, we are obviously taking the measures needed so that our clients do comply, and this will happen whether this is considered high risk or low risk and so on. The ships will comply. Obviously, you need to consider compatibility and so on, but obviously this needs to be controlled as well and so on. Now, back to your previous question on slow steaming and so on. Obviously, slow steaming is something that will help the ship owners. It will balance a little bit significantly the supply and demand of ships, and it will be positive for the ship owners, which is something which, again, for commercial reasons, as well, is being promoted heavily by certain parties.
Thank you. Do you think that older vessels will be less attractive under the global sulfur cap regulations, and may this lead to an increase in scrapping, which again may lead to renewal of fleet with more innovative solutions and alternatives? Bjørn, do you have, as an analyst, do you have any viewpoints on that?
That is, there are many answers. I would start out saying that I think the most important feature of a ship that any prospective buyers have to look at going forward is the speed consumption curve. Speed has become and will remain a very dynamic element in the market going forward. An old ship versus a modern ship. Well, we have a very optimistic view on the tanker market right now. Would I recommend somebody to go dive in and buy early 2000 built VLCC? No, because it's totally uncompetitive in the market due to the high consumption. If you move on to the bulk market, we see that early 2000 built Japanese bulkers have a very good speed consumption curve and are able to compete in today's market. They're not as good as the eco designs we see. The big problem are the mid-aged ships built, say, between 2007-8 and 2014, before the eco designs came in, because they have a huge disadvantage along the entire speed range. And bunkers next year, we've been asked so many times, how much do you think the new bunkers is going to cost? And we say, we don't know. We have seen arguments for, $80 to $100 to $120 above what we're seeing for high sulfur fuel oil today. And we're seeing good arguments for $500. We don't know. So what we've done is that we have simply said, what we do know is that the MGO HFO spread for the past 10, 15 years has on average been about $246. So yes, $250 above what we see today. And then, of course, consumption figures becomes extremely important. But there will be a pressure on old vessels, partly because of this. We must not forget that we have water ballast treatment systems to be installed on a lot of ships. All ships, every now and then, had to come in for special survey. So there's a bunch of bills piling up in front of ship owners. And generally speaking, after all those bad years, there's not much money in the industry to cover this. So yes, I think scrapping will go up, but not necessarily purely as a function of age.
Yes, I think I would concur with my colleague there. The new fuels will be more expensive, so clearly that will be one of the key things that will be taken into account on the decision as to whether you maintain a ship in your fleet. What its fuel efficiency is. The newer ships are more fuel efficient, so yes, it will be one of the components that will be taken into account. And again, yes, in the terms of the pricing of the marine 0.5% marine fuel, the market's still very much in a sort of discovery mode. There isn't enough transactions for it to be clear where that market will settle, and that will really only be known in the latter half of this year.
Can I just comment something on that? Obviously, we have our clients have requested from us certain calculations on feeding scrubbers and so on. And I confirm that the average difference which has been calculated is typically $250 per ton. However, there are those who believe as well that if you look on the pricing in South America, the difference is perhaps $40 to $50. So we really need to see how the market will adjust itself, what the price difference will be at the end.
It's clear that uncertainty is a word that goes again here, and also it's expected that it has an impact in the whole industry. And I would like to ask Andrew here is from a kind of a P&I insurance perspective. How do you evaluate the risks of this commercial landscape?
Well, unfortunately, many of us on the insurance side are waiting to see what happens. As I outlined in the introduction, you know, we are concerned primarily about the kind of the severity of certain claims. There may be an increase in frequency and severity, but it's of course the big claims that we're worried about. And if there is a blending or compatibility issue that leads to an engine problem, that leads to a grounding, then we could have the whole range of P&I claims come up, you know, and that could be on a small vessel or a large vessel, or a VLCC or a passenger ship or a small feeder vessel. So we are concerned about that. Having said that, historically, from the P&I side, we haven't had a lot of claims arising out of fuel specification problems. Now, this is a game changer. I think we can all see that. So it's a little bit different than what we have to look back on historically. But from a historic point of view, there have not been a lot of claims arising out of a fuel spec issue. So cross fingers on that front. You might remember last year, around March 2018, we had some problems that seemed to have emanated out of Houston that then spread to other places in the world relating to fuel issues, which then did create some, and I'm no engineer or technical person, but it did lead to engine problems. And I think that all of us in the whole shipping industry, and particularly in the liability side, we're looking at that with some concern as to what that might presage in terms of what happens here with IMO 2020. But you know, echoing what was said earlier, it's the uncertainty that we are still facing. You can look at some headlines and they're talking about Armageddon and apocalypse, and then others say it's going to be another Y2K. I don't know, and we don't know, but let's you know, hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Thank you. Quite an interesting aspect as such. We are in Shanghai, and just wondering, China introduced the sulfur cap 1 year before IMO. Can we see any consequences from this market? Or is it too early to say anything of the impact? It's an open question, so I don't know if anybody would like to offer any opinion.
Well, personally, I would say no. I don't really see any distraction because of that. It's just a way, I think, as well for the Chinese authorities to adjust themselves and train their inspectors. So I think I don't see any major differences because of that.
To me, it seems that we say, yes, there's a lot of uncertainties, and there are a lot of statements around what might happen. There, you are very clear that we will be prepared. We will manage this. Bjørn said that this will be a mess, more on a short-term basis. So kind of a closing comment to the panel. Who do you see will be the winner and who will be the loser under the global sulfur cap? We can start with you, Bjørn.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to name any names, but what we see, I mean, when I say a mess, I mean, I think we basically agree that there will be, on a global basis, sufficient supplies of fuels for the merchant marine or merchant fleet next year. But the problem is that it won't be enough everywhere at all given times and all required qualities. So we could see ships being stranded for short and long time. So market-wise, it's going to be big challenges. I mean, technically, we have also been given examples of the past 1 to 2 years of all the horrors that can happen. I mean, with wax in marine gas oil and incompatibility of fuels, etc. But I think that the winners are those that have really prepared. And I'm not going to give some names, but I have some specific major ship owners that didn't start preparing at Posidonia last year. Because, I mean, that this regulation will become effective one day has been known for, how long now? Since 2006, 2008, something like that. And there are prudent ship owners out there that has really read the papers that, we have to prepare. And there are a handful, and I think they will come out as winners because they have long ago secured ample supplies of compliant fuel for their own fleet.
Per, if the question is commercially who will be the winner and who is the loser, I can say that nobody really knows because the market will adjust itself. You can sit in or you can talk to a company that invested in scrubbers and they will say that this is a thing to do and the price differential will be enormous, so the investment will be paid off. And then you can talk to somebody else 5 minutes later with an equivalent fleet that they have not invested scrubbers, and they will say that they don't believe in scrubbers. They will say that clearly you take the pollution from the air and you dump it into the sea. So generally, this is a commercial. If it's a commercial question, the answer is that nobody knows. If I have to put a bit of a spicy answer, I would say that perhaps the bunker suppliers will profit out of it, and perhaps the financiers, because it will perhaps be more expensive to finance the fuel purchasing. But overall, when it comes to technically managing the ships, I think that the operators, that they were well prepared, they have done their plans, their risk assessments and so on, they will be the winners. I believe the majority of the companies have done this. But generally, I would say that the big winner will be the future generations. Even if we like it or not, we're not the cleanest industry, and we will have to move forward into the future. We will be, and that's about it. It will be more environmental friendly shipping and so on. So therefore, I see the benefits for the future.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the commercial side of this, but I think from a global side of this, and from as Andreas mentioned, our future generations, it's clear that this hopefully is going to make this world a better place to be for the future generations when it comes to from an environmental point of view. And also, I think this will also push the shipbuilding industry, the technology industry, to move forward in coming up with even more revolutionary forms of transportations in the future at sea as well. We've already just commissioned one ship that's purely LNG, and actually where she is sailing in Europe, we so far have been able to get the fuel supplies or the gas supplies that we need. But clearly it also comes with a lot of other challenges when it comes to training, etc., etc. So it's not to switch off and switch on. It's a constant evolution. I also think that batteries and fuel cells in the future will become more and more common. On a final note, you see a lot around the world about shore power, connecting to shore power when you're in port. Obviously, we can't just look at the core that you're plugging in. You need to look, where does this electricity come from? Because if that comes from a coal-fired plant, it probably would be better to run HFO in the port than actually plug in. So you kind of need to go all the way down the value chain. But in the end of the day, I think we as a maritime industry, we need to move forward and move forward in an environmental friendly way. So I think this, for all of us, hopefully will will make the industry more environmental friendly and develop the technology for that in the future.
When I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout, and the motto of the Boy Scouts is be prepared. So I will echo Sverre's comments about preparation being very important. That's, of course, in the short term, preparing for the 1 January deadline. That's 236 days from now, by the way, so there's not much time to get prepared. But those that are will be the winners in the short term. Those people, those owners, operators that are talking to their fuel, bunker suppliers, their engine makers about compatibility, blending, that kind of thing, the different products out there, putting together an operation plan both for the institution, the organization, but also each individual vessel. These things are going to be important. We don't know quite how even the port authorities are going to be in their enforcement of this, how they're going to react. Some have been doing a good job of letting us know in advance what they will do, and others haven't probably said anything. So this is one of the unknowns. But those owners, those masters and ships that go to a port and run into a problem, that then have a lot of documents showing what all they've done to prevent the problem, to mitigate the problem, to try to get the compliant fuel, all of the things that they've done to be reasonably prepared, to reasonably prevent problems, those people will come out better in the end than those that didn't do anything or did less. There's a story, the other day I was hiking in Hong Kong, and we came across a bear, and I was with a friend of mine, and I started to tie my shoe. And he said, "Why are you tying your shoe? You should be running." And he said, I said, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun my friend." So, those ship owners who are better prepared than the others will definitely come out as the winners. But of course, in the final analysis, I fully agree with my co-panelists that the future generations will be the true beneficiaries of the work that's going on right now. So that's obviously a big silver lining to this.
Okay, I think from my side, the environment should be the winner from this. If we look at who could be the losers, I think it will be the companies which haven't prepared correctly for the changeover. If you're fitting scrubbers, it's very important to make sure you have secured the high sulfur fuel oil from a reputable supplier, and the same is true, I suspect, for the low sulfur fuel. So you should be preparing with your current supplier. The ships need to be prepared, and each ship needs to have a changeover plan for both the fuels and the lubricants. So the lubricant shouldn't be forgotten in this exercise. So I think, yes, the ships and ship owners that prepare well will come out running ahead, and those that don't, that's where the risk is. We're still, if you say, 6 months more away, so there is time to get everything right, but time is short. Thank you.
Thank you. Summing up this discussion, I think that it fits very well with the framework that Dr. Stockford gave in his keynote speech. And I think that it seems to me yes, uncertainties, but we are ready, we will handle this. It is a good way forward to basically make the shipping industry a more cleaner industry in the future terms. And I think that also what Dr. Stockford said in his keynote was that we need to work together, because that's where we actually find the solutions. So to my panelists, thank you very much. I think you came with very interesting comment and observations to the market. So thank you very much.